Welcome, welcome. It is Monday, September the 22nd. Happy autumn. The autumnal equinox occurred today, Eastern time, 2:19 in the afternoon. But it is still hurricane season, as you know, and that goes right through the end of November. And we've got a lot to talk about tonight on Hurricane Hub Live. I'm Chief Meteorologist. Thanks for joining us. Tonight on HHL, we've got Gabrielle that now is a Cat 4. When we talked last night, Cat 1, barely at 75 miles per hour. So it goes without saying it went through an intense period of rapid intensification up to a Cat 4 at this time. It may even strengthen a little bit more before it starts to weaken. Up next with two other tropical waves in the basin, Humberto and Imelda. Now, the I-named storms. That letter is the most retired. 13 times an I-named storm has been retired. Not saying this one will be. Now, there's a reason for that. The I-named storm, the ninth named storm of the season, typically, climatologically, falls right around the peak of the season. So overall, environmental conditions are more conducive for strong, long-lived hurricanes that tend to be retired more. Obviously, 13 times have been retired. We'll see what happens with this Imelda when it does develop eventually over the next 7 days or so. And then out in the eastern Pacific, still some activity there. We've got one named storm, Narda, set to become a hurricane. But right now, there are no tropical waves behind Narda for development, meaning we'll probably start to see that basin quiet down a bit. Usually when that happens, we shift the activity over to the Atlantic. All right, here's a look at the infrared satellite imagery of Gabrielle. 140 mile per hour Category 4 major hurricane. Made a jump from that Cat 1 to a Cat 4 in about 18 hours. See that little dot right there? That is Bermuda. It is traveling safely to the east. In fact, there's not even any watches or warnings up for Bermuda. Barely getting a breezy day out there. Of course, some big surf propagating out towards the west from the center of Gabrielle out there, but it is moving north-northeast and away from Bermuda at around 12 miles per hour or so. But it's certainly an impressive storm, especially with its period of rapid intensification. Now, looking at it on satellite imagery, you can see it's starting to get a little bit stretched out, meaning there is some west to southwest wind shear already working on the system, and that's beginning to kind of displace a lot of the rougher weather with this system off to the northeast of that center there. You can even see the convection kind of getting eaten away on that southwestern side, the southwest quadrant of Gabrielle. All right, in terms of rapid intensification, the definition of it, the baseline definition, is an increase in its sustained maximum winds of at least 35 miles per hour in 24 hours worth of time. You'll see just what Gabrielle did. It hit that definition and went way above it. 1 in 3 storms undergo rapid intensification, and most Category 4 or 5 storms, which Gabrielle is, do see rapid intensification at some point in time throughout their lifetime. So this is our second instance this season, of course, with Erin up to a Cat 5, and then Gabrielle here right now sitting as a Category 4. All right, let's take a look at Gabrielle's rapid intensification here. From 11 o'clock last night, we were sitting at a Cat 1, 75 mile per hour winds. Jump ahead to 5 p.m. today, 18 hours later, and we're at a Cat 440. That's an increase of 65 mile per hour winds, sustained winds, with a 44 millibar drop in its central pressure. So the pressure came down, wind speeds came way up there, and that's where it currently sits. As you saw, 140 mile per hour winds right firmly in between, in the middle of that Category 4, which goes from 130 all the way up to 156, of course. North of that, we get into the Category 5 status, a very rare commodity, which we already saw this season with Erin. Very large eye with Gabrielle right now. Again, there's Bermuda heading away from there, starting to see the wind shear kind of eating away at that southwest quadrant. And we do expect it to eventually begin to degrade and weaken as it picks up forward speed and gets kind of pushed off to the north and east out in the open Atlantic, not affecting any land, which is great. And I tell you what, Bermuda has missed out on Erin, which passed by just to the west. And now you've got Gabrielle passing by just to the east. Great news for Bermuda, not seeing any direct impacts from really either storm. On visible satellite imagery, you can see just a textbook look here of this major hurricane Gabrielle with a very clearly defined eye. You can even look kind of straight down into that eye and see the stadium effect there. Not flying any recon into Gabrielle. So this is all satellite-determined stats on this, 140-mile-per-hour winds. And in fact, they did issue a special advisory today at 9 a.m. Usually they come out at 8 a.m. and then 11 a.m., but they saw on satellite imagery that there was enough to warrant the upgrade to a major hurricane earlier today. And then, of course, this afternoon made it up to a Category 4 at 5 p.m. Now, by tomorrow afternoon, 125-mile-per-hour winds forecast here, still keeping as a Category 3. Not coming below that, not weakening to a Category 2 until Wednesday afternoon, and then pretty much sailing off to the east here, headed up towards the Azores, may clip the northern islands there as a Cat 1, and then probably becoming extratropical or post-tropical as it nears the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal, and Spain. All right, elsewhere in the tropical Atlantic, there are two other waves that we're currently watching. The one in the far eastern Atlantic here has the best odds of becoming the next named storm in the short term. 80% chance here over the next week, that would be Humberto. And this looks to track off to the west-northwest, most likely headed in a similar direction from what we just saw Gabrielle track, which could put it somewhere near Bermuda. Now, farther to the west is another tropical wave here. By the way, none of these have been tagged as invest yet, so we don't have any model data on these at the moment in terms of spaghetti plots. But this one here, which is not all that far off to the east of the Leeward Islands, is projected at 50-50 odds over the next 7 days. And if we do get Humberto here, next up would be Imelda. Now, this one's development area does encompass land areas, which is the Bermuda, is the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, and even the U.S. British Virgin Islands here, and even Puerto Rico potentially developing just north of there. Same area that we saw Aaron track through about a month ago or so. And this one may be something to watch here. Models still very uncertain. Low confidence forecast at this point. One model, the GFS, shows something threatening the eastern seaboard. European says, what storm? So it's really no model agreement here, so very low confidence forecast. But right now, 50-50 odds of us getting another named storm out of that. Now, where they are right now, based on the average forward speed of tropical storms or tropical systems in the Atlantic Basin, we're about 6 to 8 days out from this one being a potential threat to the U.S. And then if the one behind it here that's got the better chance of becoming the named storm sooner, we're talking about 8, 9, 10 days out if it were to be a U.S. threat. So plenty of time to certainly watch it. As we talked about yesterday, sea surface temperatures are certainly warm enough. It's been a very lackluster season so far in terms of development. So a lot of untapped heat energy still lurks in the oceans, especially in the Caribbean and even the Southwest Atlantic as well, where we had the sea surface temperature scarring from Aaron, from the violent turbulence from mixing up the oceans and upwelling. That's completely been healed, if you will. We did have a little one here that was evident yesterday from Gabrielle, but that's also been kind of overcome and seeing it warm back up. So where you're seeing the oranges and yellows and reds, that's sea surface temperatures that are well above where they usually are this time of the year. All right, let's talk about some modeling here. Now, we do have the GFS and the European to kind of get some sort of feeling for what may happen with that second wave, the one that's farther to the west that could possibly be a threat to at least the Bahamas here. Let's go out in time. We'll take it right on through the upcoming weekend. Now, this is likely going to be what Humberto is. That's the European showing that there. Here's the European starting to pick up on maybe Imelda, again, over the northern Bahamas, off the east coast of Florida. Now we have to go a little bit farther out here. Let's see if we get anything picking up from the GFS. GFS isn't showing anything now, right up through early in the week. And we've just got the European here showing likely Humberto getting awfully close to Bermuda here by early next week. So models still really having a tough time figuring out either of these two models. We just don't have both GFS or Euro agreeing on any of them right now. So low confidence forecast. All right, in the Eastern Pacific, we do have Narda, tropical storm at the moment, but it is forecast to become a hurricane, another one, up to a Category 2 here, but heading out into the middle of the Pacific. So right now it doesn't look to be a threat to land. Why I say right now is because maybe it makes its way all the way out to Hawaii if it does hold together. But I mean, look at the list. We've just been knocking one off after the other here. And you look at our scorecard comparing the basins between the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific. East Pac has double the amount of named storms so far this season, 7 in the Atlantic, 14 in the East Pac. We've only had 2 hurricanes here, 2 majors. And then in the Eastern Pacific, 7 hurricanes, 3 major hurricanes so far. So, folks, that's the latest out there on the Atlantic Basin. After a quick break, we'll go through our tropical trivia. Stick around. Welcome back to Hurricane Hub Live. Yesterday's tropical trivia was, which Atlantic season had the most Category 5 storms on record? Well, the answer is the season that was the most active on record before 2020 came along. In that year, 2005, that had 4 Category 5 hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin, 3 of which made landfall in the U.S. All 4 did make landfall. We had a landfall in the U.S. of Rita, Katrina, and Wilma. And then, of course, into Mexico, almost South Texas, actually, near Brownsville, Emily, back in 2005. All right, tonight's trivia question. Since 1851, there have been 125 tropical storms in the month of November. I want to know how many of those became hurricanes. Again, November is the last month of the 6-month hurricane season. Typically, it's quiet. 125 storms over 175 years is not all that many. So how many do you think? 1, 12, 63, or 114 of those 125 became hurricanes? All the answer tomorrow night on Hurricane Hub Live. A reminder, we are here 7 nights a week at 8 p.m. for the latest on the tropics. We'll see you back here on Tuesday.